Picture a world where extinct animals walk the earth again, where woolly mammoths thunder across ancient valleys, and lost species return from the dust of history. This isn't science fiction. Right now, labs around the globe are racing to resurrect creatures long gone, using the power of cloning technology. But beneath the excitement lies a question few are asking: what happens when we ignore the warnings whispered through centuries of indigenous wisdom? Native cultures have carried stories for generations, stories that speak of forbidden boundaries, of consequences when humans tamper with the natural order. And in these tales, there's a chilling foresight that modern science might be overlooking. From the Cherokee to the Navajo, tribes across North America have legends that eerily mirror today's ethical dilemmas around cloning. Some speak of shapeshifters who lost their way when their essence was copied. Others tell of spirits who punished those who tried to recreate life unnaturally. These aren't just myths, they're meticulously preserved cautionary tales, passed down like maps to dangers we're only now beginning to understand. What if these stories aren't just folklore, but hard-won lessons from the past, warning us about the unseen costs of playing creator? The debate around cloning often centers on science, what we can do, but rarely on the deeper question of what we should do. Indigenous traditions force us to confront that line. They challenge us to consider the spiritual, ecological, and even cosmic ripple effects of bending life to our will. As we stand on the edge of a new era where the impossible becomes possible, these ancient voices offer something invaluable, a perspective steeped in reverence, balance, and humility. So before we take the next step into this uncharted territory, let's listen closely to the warnings carved into the bedrock of native lore, because sometimes the oldest stories hold the sharpest truths. In many Native American traditions, animals aren't just creatures, they're sacred beings woven into the very fabric of creation. The Navajo speak of the holy people, powerful spirits who shape the world alongside humans, each animal holding a piece of divine wisdom. The Cherokee tell of the Animal Council, where creatures like the wise wolf and the cunning raven gathered to teach humanity how to live in harmony with the earth. These stories aren't just tales, they're blueprints for balance, reminding us that every life has a purpose, a place in the delicate web of existence. Take the Lakota's white buffalo calf woman, a sacred figure who brought them the pipe ceremony, binding them to all living things. Her arrival wasn't just a moment in history, it was a covenant, a promise that humans would honor the sanctity of life. Or consider the Haudenosaunee's Thanksgiving address, where every animal, from the tiniest insect to the tallest tree, is acknowledged as a relative. These traditions don't just respect nature, they see it as a living, breathing family where tampering with one thread could unravel the whole tapestry. That's why the idea of cloning strikes at something deeper than science for many indigenous peoples. It's not just about whether we can recreate life, it's about whether we should. In these creation stories, animals weren't just made, they were chosen, each with a role too sacred to replicate artificially. The Hopi warn of Katsanam, spirit messengers who withdraw when humans grow arrogant, when we forget our place in the order of things. What happens when we try to redesign that order? When we stitch together life in a lab, are we honoring the spirit of the animal, or reducing it to just another tool for our curiosity? The answer isn't simple, but the warnings are there, buried in the oldest stories we have. Maybe they're not just myths, maybe they're maps left by those who came before us, marked with the pitfalls of playing God. Balance isn't just a concept in indigenous belief systems, it's the foundation of existence itself. For many Native American cultures, the universe operates like a great, intricate loom, where every thread, every plant, animal, and human must remain in perfect tension to keep the whole from unraveling. The Lakota phrase "Mitaku Oyasin," meaning "all my relations," captures this perfectly. It's a reminder that life isn't a hierarchy with humans at the top, but a circle where each being has a role that sustains the others. Disrupt one strand and the entire web trembles. This is where cloning collides with ancient wisdom. Take the story of Iktomi, the Lakota spider trickster, who once tried to rearrange the natural order for his own gain. In one telling, he meddled with the seasons, thinking he could control the cycles of life. The result: crops failed, animals vanished, and the people suffered until balance was restored through humility and ceremony. The lesson echoes through generations. When humans overreach, when we try to rewrite the rules of creation, the consequences ripple far beyond what we can foresee. The Iroquois carry a similar warning in their prophecy of the broken web. According to their teachings, the great law of peace was woven like a spider's silk, connecting all nations in harmony. But it came with a caution. If humans grew arrogant, if they began to treat life as something to own rather than respect, the web would fray. Cloning, in this light, isn't just a scientific act, it's a philosophical rupture. By stitching together life outside nature's rhythms, we risk becoming like Iktomi, trading wisdom for control. Even the process of cloning mirrors these warnings. Modern labs often use surrogate animals to carry cloned embryos, a practice that might seem harmless until viewed through indigenous eyes. The Cherokee speak of the Ane-Yunwia, the real people, who learned from the animals through sacred treaties. To force a species to bear another's young, to blur the lines between kin and creation, could be seen as a violation of those ancient agreements, but perhaps the most profound objection lies in the question of spirit. Many indigenous traditions believe animals carry more than DNA. They hold souls, unique and sacred. The Hopi speak of Kachina's spirit beings who embody the essence of living things. If a cloned animal looks the same, behaves the same, but lacks that original spark, is it truly the same being? Or is it a hollow echo, a shadow without the breath of the divine? These stories don't just challenge the ethics of cloning, they reframe the debate entirely. Science asks if we can recreate life, but indigenous wisdom asks if we understand life well enough to risk it. The answer isn't written in lab reports or DNA sequences. It's woven into the oldest stories we have, waiting for us to listen. For the Ojibwe people, animals are far more than physical beings. They're living bridges between this world and the spirit realm. Take the wolf, revered not just as a hunter but as a teacher, a guide who walks the thin line between seen and unseen. Their legends tell of Mayingan, the wolf spirit, who was bound to humans in an ancient pact. As one suffers, so does the other. This isn't metaphor, it's a spiritual truth etched into their creation story. When scientists propose cloning such creatures, it's not just genetics they're tampering with, it's a covenant older than civilization itself. The Hopi carry similar teachings through their reverence for the Coyote, a trickster whose antics mask deep wisdom. Elders speak of how the Coyote's spirit tests humanity's humility, ensuring we never forget our place in the great chain of life. To clone such a being, to reduce its essence to a lab experiment, would be like trying to capture lightning in a jar. You might replicate the form, but the spark, the meaning, slips through your fingers. There's a chilling story among Hopi elders about a time when villagers tried to control the rain spirits. The skies turned against them, sending floods instead of nourishment. The lesson: some forces aren't meant to be harnessed. Even the process of cloning echoes these warnings. Consider the bald eagle, a sacred messenger in many tribes. Its feathers are earned, not taken, given only when the bird sheds them naturally. To force an eagle's genetic copy into existence, to manipulate its very blueprint, could be seen as a theft of spirit, not just flesh. The Lakota tell of a time when hunters grew greedy, taking more animals than they needed. The buffalo vanished, leaving the people starving until prayers and repentance brought them back. The parallel is stark. When we treat life as a commodity, the consequences ripple far beyond what science can measure. Perhaps the most profound objection lies in the intent behind cloning. In indigenous cosmology, animals give themselves to humans through reciprocal relationships. The deer offers its body so the people may eat, and in return, the people honor its sacrifice. But cloning strips away that sacred exchange. A lab-grown animal never chose its role. Its existence is dictated by human curiosity, not cosmic balance. The Anishinaabe speak of the Manadug, spirits who withdraw when humans act without reverence. What happens when we engineer life without consent from the very spirits we claim to resurrect? These stories aren't antiquated superstitions, they're mirrors held up to our modern dilemmas. Science can splice genes, but can it measure soul? Technology can recreate bodies, but can it honor the threads connecting all life? The elders whisper warnings not to stifle progress, but to remind us some truths are written in the bones of the earth, waiting for us to listen. The Pueblo peoples carry a warning in their oldest stories, one that hums with eerie relevance today. They speak of the Coyote, a Hopi word meaning life out of balance, a state that arises when humans forget their place and try to bend creation to their will. Their traditions strictly forbid tampering with the forms of living things, whether carving faces into trees or reshaping animals. To them, every plant, every creature is a finished work of the divine, and altering that design invites chaos. It's not just respect, it's survival. The Pueblo tell of a time when their ancestors tried to sculpt lifeless clay into living beings. The gods, seeing this arrogance, sent floods to wash away the abominations, leaving only whispers of the lesson: some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. This taboo isn't unique to the Southwest. Across the continent, tribes like the Tlingit of the Pacific Northwest warn against mimicking the Creator's work. Their oral histories describe Raven, the trickster, who once tried to craft a new bird from sticks and feathers. The result was a monstrous thing that couldn't sing, couldn't fly, a hollow imitation that brought shame to its maker. The tale lingers like a prophecy. When humans play at creation, what we make may wear the skin of life but lack its soul. Modern cloning mirrors these ancient fears with unsettling precision. Take the story of the Zunis Ahayu, sacred twin war gods carved from wood. These figures must be ritually remade every few years, but only by appointed priests, only with prayers, and never from scratch. To mass-produce them, to strip away the ceremony, would be unthinkable. Yet in labs today, we do the opposite, extracting DNA like a recipe, assembling life without the songs, the stories, the reciprocity that indigenous traditions demand. The Cherokee say animals gave humans gifts: fur for warmth, meat for strength, but only after centuries of proving their respect. What gift does a cloned animal give when its very existence is dictated by a pipette and a patent? Perhaps the most striking parallel lies in the consequences these stories foretell. The Hopi speak of the Pahana, the lost white brother who would one day return with great inventions but also great arrogance. Some elders see cloning as a fulfillment of this prophecy, a technology that dazzles but disrupts the web of life. They point to the decline of bees, the silence of once teeming rivers, and whisper, "Didn't the old stories warn us?" That when we stitch life together like a coat, forgetting the spirit woven into each thread, the whole fabric begins to unravel. These taboos aren't arbitrary rules. They're ecological wisdom dressed as myth. The Pueblo don't just fear the act of copying life, they fear the hubris behind it, the assumption that we know enough to control what we don't understand. In their ceremonial kivas, underground chambers that mirror the womb of the earth, they still chant the same plea: humility. A cloned sheep may bleat, a mammoth may walk again, but if the songs of creation aren't sung over them, can they ever truly be alive? The answer might lie in the dust of cultures that refuse to play God, and the warnings they left behind. Long before laboratories or microscopes existed, the Hopi people spoke of a future where humans would build a square gray animal that roamed the land, a prophecy some elders interpret as cars, but others see as something far more unsettling: artificial life. Their stories tell of the Coyote prophecy, where humanity's meddling with nature's design would bring about a world so unbalanced, even the skies would turn hostile. The parallels to cloning are uncanny. When scientists extract DNA from extinct species or splice genes to create new ones, they're not just breaking biological barriers, they're crossing spiritual boundaries the Hopi warned about for centuries. The Apache carry a similar warning in their tale of the gambler, a figure who tried to cheat death by stealing the secrets of creation. In one version, he traps the spirits of animals in clay figurines, forcing them to do his bidding. The gods, enraged, send a great flood to wipe his works away, leaving only a single warning etched into the rocks: to remake life is to unravel it. Modern cloning follows the same dangerous logic, taking the blueprint of existence and bending it to human will, as if life were a puzzle to solve rather than a mystery to honor. Even the Cherokee's Octina legend holds a mirror to today's genetic experiments. The Octina was a serpent so powerful, its mere gaze could turn living things to stone. It was created when a hunter, hungry for power, tried to fuse the traits of multiple animals into one. The result wasn't a superior being, it was a monster that devoured its own creator. The story reads like an ancient cautionary tale about hybrid cloning, where combining DNA from different species might seem like progress, but risks consequences we can't foresee. What makes these prophecies so chilling isn't just their accuracy, it's their insistence that the greatest danger lies in the arrogance of the act. The Hopi speak of the blue star Kachina, a celestial sign marking the moment humanity's tampering would bring the world to the brink. They don't describe it as a punishment, but a consequence, the natural result of treating life as a tool rather than a gift. When labs announce plans to resurrect mammoths or engineer chickens with dinosaur traits, they frame it as triumph. But through indigenous eyes, it echoes something far older, the folly of reaching for what belongs to the gods. Perhaps the most haunting warning comes from the Anishinaab's seventh fire prophecy. It describes a crossroads where humanity must choose between two paths, one where technology serves balance and another where it severs our bond with creation. Cloning sits at that very junction. Will we use it to heal or to play creator? The prophecy doesn't answer. It simply warns that the choice will define the fate of all living things. And in that silence lies the power of these stories. They don't forbid progress. They ask us to remember the price of forgetting our place in the web of life. In Plains and Southwest traditions, the coyote isn't just an animal, it's the ultimate trickster, a shape-shifting force of chaos who stumbles through creation with equal parts cunning and recklessness. His stories read like ancient parables about the dangers of playing God. Take the Navajo tale where Coyote steals fire from the gods, convinced he can control it. He doesn't just burn his paws, he sets the whole world ablaze, forcing the other animals to intervene before his arrogance consumes everything. There's a reason elders recount these stories with gravity. Coyote's experiments always spiral beyond his control, leaving others to clean up the mess. Modern cloning carries eerie echoes of these warnings. Like Coyote snatching stars from the sky to light his den, scientists splice genes to resurrect extinct species or engineer hybrid creatures, often with unintended consequences. The first cloned sheep, Dolly, lived half as long as her natural counterparts, her cells aging unnaturally fast. Later experiments saw cloned pigs develop arthritis, cloned mice succumb to obesity, their bodies betraying the hidden costs of artificial creation. Just as Coyote's schemes backfire, revealing forces he never understood, cloning unveils biological complexity science is still grappling with. Yet where indigenous stories frame this as hubris, the scientific world often sees it as progress. Labs champion de-extinction projects like the woolly mammoth revival as ecological restoration, framing genetic tinkering as a tool to heal damaged ecosystems. Supporters argue these efforts could slow Arctic permafrost melt or replace lost keystone species. It's a seductive narrative of humanity correcting its past mistakes through ingenuity. But the Coyote tales whisper a counterpoint. The road to chaos is paved with good intentions. The Zuni tell of Coyote trying to improve the first humans by stuffing them with extra organs, only to leave them gasping under the weight of organs they couldn't use. The parallel is uncomfortably clear. Even well-meaning tampering can distort life's delicate balance. The tension between these worldviews boils down to humility. Coyote never pauses to ask if he should rearrange creation, he just does, drunk on his own cleverness. Meanwhile, indigenous frameworks insist some knowledge demands reverence, not just mastery. The Blackfoot speak of Nappy, their own trickster figure, who tried to sculpt the perfect bird from clay. When it couldn't fly, he smashed it in frustration, scattering shards that became mosquitoes, a plague born from impatience. Similarly, rushed cloning projects risk unintended ripple effects. Resurrected species outcompeting modern ones, lab-born animals suffering unseen defects, ecosystems destabilized by reintroductions without ancestral memory. But here's where the stories offer more than just warnings, they map a wiser path forward. Unlike Coyote, many traditions celebrate figures like the Hopi's spider grandmother, who weaves life with natural laws, not against them. Her creations thrive because they honor the existing web. Perhaps the lesson isn't to abandon cloning outright, but to approach it as the old teachers would, with patience, ceremony, and deep listening. After all, even Coyote occasionally stumbles into wisdom, not by conquering the world, but by finally recognizing his place within it. To the Haida people of the Pacific Northwest, every animal carries more than flesh and bone. It holds a sacred essence, a spirit given by Raven at the dawn of time. Their stories tell of a taboo so severe it shakes the foundation of their world, stealing an animal's form. In one legend, a hunter traps a supernatural being in the shape of a bear, thinking he can wield its power. But when he tries to wear its skin, the stolen form twists against him, his hands become claws, his voice a growl, until he's neither man nor beast but a monstrous thing caught between worlds. The message is clear: to take an animal's essence without its consent isn't just wrong, it unravels the very fabric of existence. This belief finds disturbing parallels in modern cloning. Where scientists see DNA as a biological code to be copied, many indigenous traditions see it as a sacred thread connecting body and spirit. The Tlingit warn of the Kooxeedi, spirits who punish those who mimic animal forms without permission. Their oral histories describe a time when a carver fashioned masks too lifelike, capturing the souls of the creatures he imitated. The repercussions were swift. The masks screamed at night, the animals vanished from the forest, and the people starved until the carver destroyed his work. To the Tlingit, cloning isn't innovation, it's the ultimate theft, scraping the marrow from life's bones and leaving the spirit behind. Even the process of cloning mirrors these ancient warnings. The Haida speak of the Esgona, orca spirits who choose when to gift their bodies to hunters. To take a whale outside this covenant, to claim its life without the sacred exchange of prayer and respect, invites calamity. Yet the extinction projects propose resurrecting species like the Stella's sea cow, a creature the Haida once hunted in ceremony. If science brings it back without the songs, the stories, the reciprocal relationship that once bound hunter and hunted, is it a homecoming or a hollow puppet show? The Haida elder Gidansta Gujo once said, "We don't own the land, we belong to it." Cloning flips that truth on its head, treating life as something to be owned, controlled, and reassembled at will. The consequences in these stories are never abstract. The Tsimshian tell of a shaman who tried to duplicate a salmon spirit to feed his starving village. The river swarmed with fish, but their flesh turned to ash in the mouth, their bodies dissolving like mist. The people learned too late that copying life's shell without its soul is a hunger that can never be satisfied. Today, cloned animals face similar fates. Creatures like the Gore, an endangered ox cloned in 2001, died within days of birth, their bodies failing under the weight of artificial creation. Science calls it biological limitations. Indigenous stories call it what it's always been: the recoil of stolen power. What makes these traditions so urgent isn't just their warnings, but their wisdom. They don't reject human ingenuity, they demand it be tempered with reverence. The Kwakwa Kawakwa have a ritual where dancers wear animal masks not to mimic, but to honor channeling spirits who willingly share their power. The difference is consent. A cloned mammoth or passenger pigeon never chose to return. Its existence is dictated by human whims, not the sacred dialogue these cultures uphold. As the Haida artist Bill Reed once carved into his totem poles, the waves of progress crash hardest when we forget the currents that came before. For the Apache people, hunting was never simply about taking life. It was a sacred conversation between species, bound by rituals of respect that stretched back to the first dawn. Before a hunt, Apache men would fast and pray, smearing their faces with pollen to purify themselves. They spoke not of conquest but of petition, asking the deer or buffalo for the gift of its body. If an animal fell to their arrows, the hunter would place cornmeal in its mouth, a promise that its spirit would find its way home. Every part of the creature was used: hide for clothing, bones for tools, sinew for thread, because wasting even a scrap would insult the being who'd offered itself. This wasn't just sustainability, it was kinship, a recognition that life flows in cycles of giving and receiving. Compare that to the reality of cloning. In labs, animals are engineered not through ceremony but spreadsheets, their existence predetermined by human agendas, their bodies reduced to biological factories. Where the Apache saw a divine exchange, modern science often sees efficiency. Indigenous traditions treat animals as sovereign beings entering into a pact. Cloning treats them as patents, their genetic code commodified like lines of computer software. The Lakota tell of a time when hunters grew greedy, taking more buffalo than they needed. The herds retreated into the earth, leaving the people to starve until they relearned humility. Today's de-extinction projects echo that warning. When we resurrect species not out of reverence but curiosity or profit, what unseen contracts might we be breaking? The consequences in these stories are never metaphorical. The Cheyenne recount the fate of a warrior who boasted over his kills, skinning deer without the proper prayers. That night, the animal people came to him in a dream, their eyes hollow, their pelts hanging in tatters. "Since you treat us as meat," they whispered, "meat is all you'll ever be." By dawn, the man's flesh had hardened like jerky, his voice gone as mute as a butchered carcass. The tale isn't just about gratitude, it's about recognition that animals are not resources but persons in their own right. Cloning, by contrast, reduces them to genetic puzzles, their worth measured in data points rather than spiritual relationships. Even the language we use betrays this shift. The Apache word for hunt, Ndibil, translates to walking with the animals. Modern labs speak of de-extinction pipelines and genome editing platforms. One frames life as a dance, the other an assembly line. The Arapaho tell of ghost buffalo, spectral herds that appear to those who have forgotten the old ways, their hooves shaking the earth not in anger but sorrow. Perhaps resurrecting a mammoth isn't the triumph we imagine, but a ghostly pantomime, a creature returned to a world that no longer knows how to honor it. The heart of these traditions isn't opposition to science, it's a plea for context. The Navajo didn't just hunt, they sang the Deer Way songs, aligning their actions with the harmonies of creation. If cloning is to have a place in our future, it must answer the question Indigenous wisdom has always asked, not just how to recreate life, but why, and who, in the end, is truly serving whom. To the Nez Perce people, the wolf isn't just a predator, it's a thread in an unbroken tapestry of spirits stretching back to the first dawn. Their elders speak of Wayakin, the life force passed down through generations, connecting each animal to its ancestors in an endless sacred chain. When a wolf howls, they say it's not just calling to its pack, it's communing with every wolf that ever was, their voices woven together across time. This belief transforms cloning from a scientific feat into a spiritual crisis. If you splice genes in a lab to recreate a wolf's body, where does its way-kin come from? The Nez Perce warn of stories where hunters tried to breed supernatural wolves outside the natural order. The resulting creatures were silent, no howls, no spark behind the eyes, as if the ancestral thread had been severed. The Micmac carry similar teachings through their legend of Cluskap, the great teacher who shaped their world. In one tale, he creates the first moose by breathing life into clay, but only after consulting the animal spirits who agreed to join this world. Later, when greedy men tried to shortcut this process by copying moose without the spirit's blessing, the creatures crumbled to dust before their eyes. The lesson wasn't about the fragility of bodies, it was about the sanctity of lineage. Modern cloning mirrors this arrogance, assembling animals from genetic blueprints as if DNA alone holds the key to life. But to many indigenous cultures, a cloned mammoth or black-footed ferret would be like those soulless clay moose, a physical shell lacking the ancestral chorus that gives its species meaning. This tension between science and spirit reveals itself most starkly in the stories of hybrid beings. The Navajo speak of Yayetso, giants born when ancient humans tried to mix animal bloodlines unnaturally. These abominations didn't just violate physical laws, they ruptured the spiritual fabric, leaving wounds in creation that took generations to heal. Today's attempts to blend species through cloning, like splicing elephant and mammoth DNA, risk repeating those violations. The Cherokee tell of Actina's children, monstrous serpents born when the original Actina tried to replicate itself without the proper ceremonies. Each generation grew more deformed, their scales cracking as the ancestral memory faded. It's a haunting metaphor for what happens when we replicate life without honoring the unseen threads that bind it together. Perhaps the most profound warning comes from the Anishinaabem's Seven Fires prophecy, which speaks of a time when the water of life will be cut in two. Some interpreters see this as cloning, the literal splitting of life's continuity, where offspring no longer flow naturally from ancestors but are manufactured in isolation. The Anishinaabe say every animal carries Manaduwiwin, a piece of the Great Spirit's essence passed down like an eternal flame. Cloning doesn't just risk producing a genetic copy, it risks creating a being disconnected from that sacred fire, wandering without the spiritual lineage that guides its kind. When elders from these traditions hear of frozen cells from extinct species being revived, they don't ask if it's possible. They ask who will sing the songs to call its spirit home. These stories aren't rejections of science, but reminders of responsibility. The Hopi speak of Powakatsi, a warning against creating life without understanding its full cost, not just to ecosystems, but to the invisible web connecting all beings. As labs stockpile DNA from endangered species like frozen libraries, indigenous wisdom urges us to listen deeper. A tiger cloned from a century-old sample may share its ancestors' stripes, but will it dream their dreams, hunt their hunts, or will it be a ghost in its own skin, severed from the river of spirits that once carried its kind forward? The answer lies somewhere between Petri dishes and ancient fires, waiting for us to bridge the gap. The Lenape people tell of a prophecy whispered through generations, a vision of trees that no longer bear fruit, rivers thick with poison, and animals that walk like shadows of themselves. At the heart of this warning lies a truth modern science is only beginning to grasp. Life isn't just about biology. It's about relationships, the unseen threads connecting creatures to their land, their ancestors, the very rhythm of the seasons. When the Lenape elders spoke of ecological imbalance, they weren't just forecasting pollution or deforestation. They were describing a world where the spirit of nature had withdrawn, leaving hollow imitations behind. This mirrors the hidden dilemma of cloning with eerie precision. Take the case of the black-footed ferret, one of the first endangered species cloned in labs. Scientists celebrated the birth of Elizabeth Ann, a genetic copy of a ferret that died decades ago. But beneath the triumph lurked unasked questions. Would she know how to hunt prairie dogs, her ancestral prey? Would her pups inherit the instincts of a lineage frozen in time? Indigenous stories frame this as more than practicality. It's a rupture in the sacred dialogue between species. The Lenape say animals teach each other through dreams, passing down knowledge as intangible as it is vital. A cloned ferret might share DNA with its wild cousins, but without that lived wisdom, without the songs of its ancestors woven into its bones, can it truly belong? The Hopi carry similar warnings in their tales of the Koyaanisqatsi, the chaos that follows when life loses its spiritual anchor. They describe crops that wither despite fertile soil, deer that forget migration paths, not from lack of food but from a deeper dislocation. Modern ecology confirms this in startling ways. Wolves reintroduced to Yellowstone didn't just control elk populations. Their very presence altered river courses, as if the land remembered how to breathe when its ancient caretakers returned. But cloned wolves, their bodies might regulate ecosystems, but indigenous wisdom would ask, can they listen to the land? The Cree tell of Witiko, a monstrous force born when beings forget their place in the web of life. In their stories, Witiko isn't just a predator, it's a warning. When we reassemble life like machinery, treating ecosystems as puzzles to be solved rather than conversations to be joined, we risk creating creatures that move through the world like strangers in their own skin. Even the science of rewilding stumbles against this truth. Labs now store genetic samples of extinct species like the ivory-billed woodpecker, promising to restore lost biodiversity. But the Choctaw speak of birds as messengers between worlds, their wings carrying prayers to the spirit realm. A cloned woodpecker might tap the right trees, but who will teach it the songs that once told the forest when to bloom? The Lenape prophecy doesn't just caution against ecological damage, it warns of a silence deeper than extinction. When the animal people's voices fade, the elders say, the wind itself forgets its name. Perhaps the most chilling parallel lies in the fate of the passenger pigeon. Once numbering in the billions, their flocks darkened skies for days. Scientists now dream of resurrecting them through cloning, splicing DNA from museum specimens into modern rock doves. But the Menominee tell of a time when the pigeon nations grew arrogant, believing their numbers made them invincible. The Creator, seeing this pride, scattered them to the winds, not as punishment but as reminder, no being thrives alone. A lab-born passenger pigeon might resemble its ancestors, but without the generations that taught it to navigate storms, to read the magnetic pull of the earth, will it be a homecoming or a ghost? These prophecies don't oppose conservation, they reframe it. The Potawatomi teach that ecosystems heal not just through species but through stories. When a wolf howls, it's calling not just to its pack but to the ancestors of the deer it hunts, the roots of the trees that shelter it. Cloning offers the shape of life, but indigenous wisdom asks, where's the soul? As the Lenape elders would say, a forest isn't rebuilt with seeds alone. It's rebuilt with memory. Science can rebuild a body, but can it rebuild a soul? That's the question haunting the edges of cloning technology, and one that indigenous traditions have wrestled with for centuries. The Blackfoot tell of the Ninotsi, shadow creatures fashioned by reckless sorcerers, perfect replicas of animals, down to the last claw and whisker, but with hollow eyes and silent hearts. Hunters who pursued them returned empty-handed, their arrows passing straight through as if striking mist. These weren't just failed copies, they were warnings that life without spirit is little more than a puppet, moving but never truly alive. Modern labs face a similar dilemma. When researchers cloned the first primate in 2018, a macaque named Zhong Zhong, the breakthrough was celebrated. Yet quietly, scientists noted oddities. Cloned animals often suffer from shortened lifespans, organ defects, or erratic behaviors. The Cree would nod knowingly at these glitches. Their legends speak of Witiko, a being assembled from stolen flesh, hungering endlessly because no spirit ever filled its hollow bones. To them, these aren't genetic flaws, they are spiritual absences, the price of stitching together life without the breath of the divine. The disconnect runs deeper than biology. For tribes like the Ojibwe, animals carry manadu, a sacred essence passed down like an eternal flame from ancestor to descendant. A cloned wolf might share identical DNA with its progenitor, but who lights its manadu? The Cheyenne tell of a time when a shaman tried to duplicate an eagle's spirit to save his people. The new bird looked flawless until it took flight. Instead of soaring, it circled endlessly, unable to navigate without the ancestral memories woven into its feathers. Cloning's greatest challenge isn't replicating cells, it's replicating the story, the generations of knowledge, the whispered songs, the invisible threads binding a creature to its place in the world. Even the rituals surrounding death reveal this divide. The Lakota bury buffalo skulls with ceremony, ensuring the spirit's journey continues. But what becomes of a cloned buffalo born from a test tube? Its DNA may be revived, but the chain of prayers, the cycle of return and rebirth, is severed. The Hopi speak of Koyaanisqatsi creatures being so detached from the web of life that they wander without purpose, draining vitality from the land around them. It's a haunting lens through which to view the extinction projects. A resurrected mammoth might graze, but without the ice age winds in its memory, can it ever truly belong to the tundra? Perhaps the most striking evidence lies in behavior. Wild wolves teach their pups to hunt through play, their lessons echoing generations of wisdom, but a cloned wolf raised in a lab. It might snap at prey instinctively, but will it understand the rhythm of the hunt, the patience of stalking, the respect for the kill? The Blackfoot described this as missing the song beneath the skin. Science can copy the notes, but not the music. When elders from these traditions hear of cloned salmon being released into rivers, they don't ask if the fish will survive. They ask who will teach them the currents. This isn't to say cloning lacks value, but indigenous wisdom insists it demands humility. The Tlingit tell of Raven remaking the world after a flood, not by force but by listening to the stones, the tides, the remnant voices of the old world. If we're to reassemble life, these stories urge us to ask not just how but why, and to remember that some threads once cut can never be rewoven. For centuries, colonial powers didn't just take land from indigenous peoples. They stole sacred objects, stripping them of context and meaning to display as curiosities in distant museums. A Haida totem pole hauled to London wasn't just wood. It was a living chronicle of ancestors now silenced behind glass. Today, as corporations race to patent genes from the Amazon to the Arctic, cloning has become the newest frontier of this old violence, not just appropriating culture, but life itself. The Cherokee tell of the Anatsisqua, a sacred eagle feather stolen by outsiders who thought its power could be owned. When they tried to replicate it, the copies brought only storms, a warning that some things lose their essence when severed from the hands that honor them. Modern biotech operates on the same flawed premise. When companies extract DNA from indigenous crops like Ecuador's ayahuasca or Hawaii's taro, slapping patents on millennia-old genetic wisdom, they're repeating history with test tubes. The Navajo speak of Yayitso, giants born when sacred treasures were hoarded by the greedy. Now, those giants wear lab coats. Take the case of the Enola bean, a Mexican yellow variety patented by a U.S. company in 1999. Overnight, farmers who'd cultivated it for generations became criminals for saving seeds. The Hopi would recognize this pattern. Their stories describe Pahana, the lost white brother who returns not with open hands but with ledgers, demanding ownership of the very breath of life. The parallels between stolen artifacts and cloned genes run deeper than metaphor. The Kwakwaka'wakwa of the Pacific Northwest have fought for decades to reclaim ritual masks from museums, not just as objects but as living beings requiring ceremony. Yet when scientists splice genes from Inuit sled dogs or Nez Perce Appaloosa horses into new clones, nobody asks if these creatures, too, deserve repatriation, if their lineage carries obligations no patent can override. The Lakota say Mitakui Oyasin, all my relations, meaning every life is kin, not property. But biotech firms treat DNA like gold in a colonial vault, mining genomes while dismissing the spiritual contracts woven into them. Even the language of cloning exposes this disconnect. Terms like de-extinction and gene editing frame life as software to be hacked, ignoring indigenous frameworks where animals are sovereign nations unto themselves. The Tlingit tell of Yale, the raven, who gifted salmon to humans only after they promised to respect the fish's autonomy. Contrast that with de-extinction projects like the Lazarus Project, which aims to resurrect the gastric brooding frog, a creature extinct since the 1980s, without consulting the Aboriginal peoples who once knew its songs. Its extraction masked as salvation, like displaying a stolen totem pole while calling it preservation. The cruelty of this new colonialism lies in its selective reverence. Corporations clone endangered species like the black-footed ferret for PR campaigns, while ignoring the indigenous practices that sustained biodiversity for millennia. The Menominee managed their forests so expertly that their timber stands thrived even as surrounding lands were clear-cut. Yet when their ancient strains of wild rice, Manumin, the good berry, effaced genetic piracy, caught side with patent holders. The message is clear: native knowledge is valuable only when stripped of its keepers, like sacred texts translated by thieves. There's a Potawatomi prophecy about a time when the world would become so unbalanced even the stones would weep. Today, those tears might be the sterile tubes holding frozen DNA samples, the silence of a cloned calf whose birth wasn't celebrated with the Choctaws' Heliso prayers. The issue isn't progress, it's power. When a Mohawk seed saver and a Monsanto exec stand in the same field, one sees ancestors whispering in the stalks, the other sees barcodes. Until cloning reckons with that divide, it risks becoming just another colonial ship, sailing forward while trailing the wreckage of what it never understood. The Dakota people tell of the Wakinian, the thunder beings who rode down from the stars on bolts of lightning, but before them came the Wakan Thanka, the star people. These celestial visitors didn't just bring fire or tools, they brought sacred laws etched in the language of constellations. Among their most urgent teachings was a warning: to mimic creation without understanding its sacred threads is to invite chaos. Their stories describe star-born beings who tried to reshape life on other worlds, splicing spirits like clay. The results were abominations, creatures with too many eyes, rivers that flowed backward, skies that rained ash. The star people fled these broken worlds, carrying their lesson to Earth: tamper with life's design, and you unravel the very fabric of existence. This cosmic caution mirrors modern cloning debates with uncanny clarity. When scientists splice genes to resurrect extinct species or engineer hybrid animals, they echo the star people's failed experiments, assuming mastery over life's blueprint without grasping its deeper rhythms. The Dakota elders speak of Takuskanshkan, the great mystery that hums beneath all creation. Cloning may replicate DNA, they argue, but can it replicate the Takuskanshkan woven into each strand? The star people's warnings weren't just about can, they were about cost. Their legends tell of a world where beings duplicated themselves endlessly until their copies grew so hollow they devoured the original stars. The parallels extend beyond metaphor. Consider the story of Falling Star, a celestial child who descended to heal the Dakota people. Before returning to the skies, he left them with a prophecy: when the children of Earth forget their place among the stars, they will remake life as dolls, and the dolls will remake them. It's a chilling foreshadowing of cloning's ethical quagmires. Lab-grown animals often suffer shortened lifespans, organ defects, and erratic behaviors, what the Dakota might call wanagi, ghostly echoes of true life. Even successful clones like Dolly the sheep aged unnaturally fast, their cells fraying like overstretched threads. The star people's message wasn't anti-science, it was a plea for scale. The Dakota still chant this truth in their Heyoka ceremonies, where sacred clowns mock human arrogance by pretending to create life from mud only for their sculptures to crumble, revealing the folly of playing God. Yet these stories offer more than warnings. They map an alternative path. The Star People didn't abandon their wisdom, they entrusted it to those who agreed to listen. When Dakota elders oppose patenting genetically modified seeds or cloning sacred animals like the white buffalo, they're not rejecting progress. They're demanding the humility the Star People taught, that true innovation walks hand in hand with reverence. The Witchoan, or holy men, still trace constellations to remember the pact that every act of creation must honor the web connecting stars, soil, and spirit. Perhaps the most profound lesson lies in the Dakota's Wakinian ceremonies, where lightning isn't feared but welcomed as a purifying force. The thunder beings, like cloning technology, wield terrible power, but only when severed from ethics do they bring ruin. The Star People's legacy isn't a veto on science, it's a challenge to wield its fire wisely. As labs stockpile DNA like stardust and corporations patent genomes like conquered galaxies, these ancient sky stories whisper a question modern innovators rarely ask: who will teach us to weigh cosmic power against cosmic responsibility? The answer might lie not in Petri dishes, but in the Dakota's oldest prayer, Mitakui Oyasin, whispered not just to kin, but to the universe itself. For the Dene, the Navajo people, sheep are more than livestock. They are sacred relatives woven into the very fabric of their creation stories. When a Dene shepherd selects which rams to breed, the process isn't just about size or wool quality. It's a ceremony. Elders sing Hajawaji beauty way prayers over the flock, asking the holy people to guide the pairing. The strongest ram isn't chosen in isolation. His lineage is traced back through generations, ensuring his nishi, his spirit, carries the resilience of ancestors who endured droughts and blizzards. This isn't animal husbandry as the modern world understands it. It's a covenant, a collaboration between human and animal that honors natural limits. Compare that to the stark mechanics of cloning, where Navajo herders spend lifetimes observing the subtle interplay of genetics and environment. Cloning accelerates the process with hyper-precision, extracting DNA, inserting it into eggs, and jump-starting life in sterile incubators. The difference isn't just technical, it's philosophical. Traditional breeding works with nature's rhythms, accepting that some lambs will be frail, some bloodlines will fade, and the land itself has a say in what thrives. Cloning, by contrast, seeks to override those rhythms, replacing chance with control. The Zuni tell of a time when their people tried to force corn to grow in barren soil by chanting the wrong prayers. The stalks grew tall, but the kernels were empty. The elders nodded. Life obeys deeper laws than human will. Even the goals diverge radically. The Navajo prize sheep with traits honed by necessity, thick coats for winter, strong hooves for rocky terrain. These aren't arbitrary standards, they're dialogues with the land. Cloning, however, often prioritizes spectacle or nostalgia, resurrecting woolly mammoths because we can, or replicating a champion racehorse's genes to cash in on its legacy. The Lakota speak of Tathanka, the buffalo, whose massive herds were shaped by millennia of prairie winds and wolf hunts. To clone a buffalo today, selecting for docility or meat yield, would be to sculpt a caricature, a body without the story etched by storms and survival. The ethical chasm widens when considering generational knowledge. A Dene shepherd inherits not just sheep but oral histories, which use boar twins during the Great Freeze of 1947, which rams sired lines that survived the drought of 2002. This wisdom lives in songs, not spreadsheets. Cloning discards that lineage, treating DNA as a standalone blueprint. It's like copying a sacred sand painting but skipping the prayers that activate its power. The Hopi warn of Koyaanisqatsi life out of balance when shortcuts replace reverence. Their ancestors bred drought-resistant beans over centuries, whispering to the seeds as they planted. A lab could splice those traits in months, but could it teach the beans to listen? Perhaps the starkest contrast lies in accountability. If a cloned animal suffers from hidden defects, like the arthritis plaguing cloned pigs, scientists call it a technical hurdle. But in Navajo tradition, a sickly lamb is a spiritual alarm. The herder examines not just the animal, but his own actions. Were the prayers rushed? Was the flock stressed? The Cheyenne tell of a warrior who ignored his horse's fatigue, pushing it to win a race. The horse collapsed, and the man spent years atoning not just for the loss, but for the arrogance of treating life as a tool. Cloning's risks aren't just biological, they're existential. When we engineer life without the humility of shepherds, without the patience to let the land whisper its veto, we risk becoming like the trickster Coyote, so fixated on the chase that we forget why we're running. Yet this isn't a rejection of science, it's a plea for integration. The Nez Perce selectively bred the Appaloosa horse for endurance and intelligence, but they also sang to the foals, welcoming them into the circle of kinship. Modern cloning could learn from that balance. Imagine a world where the extinction projects consulted tribal elders, where labs paired geneticists with DNA shepherds to ask, how do we honor what we revive? The answer might lie not in petri dishes or pastures alone, but in the space between, where double helices and creation stories finally meet. When Dolly the sheep was born in 1996, scientists celebrated her as a triumph, proof that life could be rewoven from a single cell. But through the lens of indigenous traditions, her story takes on darker hues. The Navajo speak of Anoi, beings stitched together from stolen parts, who wander the earth without true souls. The Cherokee warn of Actina's brood, creatures born when the natural order is forced, their bodies whole but their spirits fractured. Dolly, with her lab-born heartbeat and borrowed DNA, might not seem monstrous. But to many native cultures, her existence would echo their oldest warnings about tampering with the threads of creation. The Lakota tell of Iktomi, the trickster spider, who once tried to weave a new animal from scraps of fur and bone. At first, his creation seemed perfect until it opened its mouth and no sound came out. No songs, no growls, just silence. Dolly's life mirrored this eerily. Though she looked like any other sheep, her cells aged unnaturally fast, her body burdened by glitches science couldn't explain. To the Lakota, these wouldn't be technical limitations, they'd be signs of a deeper absence. The Nia, the breath of life, can't be photocopied. For the Hopi, cloning would invoke the Koyaanisqatsi prophecies, visions of life dislodged from its sacred rhythms. Their stories describe corn that grows tall but bears no fruit, animals that walk but don't remember their prayers. Dolly, conceived in steel and glass rather than pasture and sky, fits this pattern. The Hopi say all beings are born with two essences, the physical body and the kachina, the spirit that connects them to the web of life. A cloned sheep might carry genes, but without the kachina passed down through generations, is she truly alive, or just a shadow moving through the world? Even Dolly's origins would unsettle indigenous ethics. To create her, scientists took a cell from one sheep's udder and fused it with another's egg, a violation of natural kinship that echoes the Tlingits' tales of stolen forms. Their legends speak of Gangsala, seals skinned by greedy hunters who then wore their pelts to lure more prey. The seals' spirits retaliated by twisting the hunters' bodies, leaving them neither human nor beast. Dolly's birth, too, was a kind of theft, her DNA harvested without consent, her existence dictated by human curiosity rather than the reciprocal bonds tribes uphold with animals. Yet the most poignant critique might come from the Nez Perce. Their horse breeding traditions honor the Wayakin, the life force flowing from ancestor to descendant. When choosing stallions, they trace lineage not just for strength, but for spirit, the courage of a sire who survived blizzards, the wisdom of a dam who led herds through floods. Dolly had no such lineage. Her mother was a test tube, her ancestry a freezer vial. The Nez Perce would say she was severed from the Wayakin's river, a lone ripple cut off from the stream. Dolly's creators saw a breakthrough, but through native eyes, her short, troubled life, the arthritis, the premature aging reads less like a fluke and more like fulfillment of the old prophecies. The creed tell of Witiko, a being assembled from scavenged flesh, forever hungry because no spirit ever filled it. Dolly, the most famous sheep in history, may have grazed and barred. But in the hush between breaths, the elders whisper, did she ever truly sing? Across countless native traditions, there exists a bone-deep warning that when humans twist the natural order, the results aren't just flawed, they're monstrous. The Navajo speak of Yi-Noldlushii, shapeshifters who graft animal skins to their bodies, gaining power but losing their humanity. The Algonquin tell of the Wendigo, a once human creature warped by greed into something ravenous and hollow. These aren't just boogeymen, they're mirrors reflecting the consequences of crossing lines the cosmos drew. Today, as scientists splice genes to create hybrids like glowing zebrafish or goat spider silk producers, the old stories whisper a question: are we crafting tools or are we birthing new kinds of monsters? The parallels between these myths and modern biotech are unsettling. Take the Wendigo, born when a person consumes human flesh, a violation of nature's most sacred taboo. Its hunger only grows with each meal, its body stretching into an emaciated horror. Now consider the reality of transgenic cloning, where species barriers are treated like outdated firewalls. Scientists have inserted jellyfish genes into rabbits, creating creatures that glow under black light. The Wendigo's lesson was about insatiable appetite for power, for control. Doesn't the same hunger drive us to redesign life itself, splicing traits like a child stacking Lego, heedless of the blueprint beneath? Skinwalker legends carry an even darker resonance. These beings don't just wear animal forms, they steal them, trapping the spirits of wolves or owls to fuel their witchcraft. Compare that to the process of xenotransplantation, where pig hearts are genetically altered for human transplants. The science is noble, saving lives, but the method echoes the old taboos. The Navajo say skinwalkers lose their souls because they sever the threads binding spirit to body. When we engineer animals to be organ factories, are we honoring their essence or reducing them to biological spare parts? The Cherokee tell of the Octina, a serpent so twisted by unnatural magic that its scales crystallized into killing stones. Its very gaze could petrify. Modern labs may not deal in curses, but when we tweak life's code without understanding its deeper language, couldn't we too unleash unintended horrors? Even the process of cloning mirrors these cautionary tales. The Cree describe Witiko as a being stitched together from stolen flesh, a patchwork of parts that never truly cohere. Cloned animals often suffer from genomic imprinting defects, their cells struggling to interpret copied DNA. Dolly the sheep aged prematurely. Cloned mice develop obesity. These aren't just glitches, they're manifestations of a deeper truth. Life resists being photocopied. The Lakota say Tathanka. The buffalo gave its body to the people, but only after centuries of proving their respect. When we mass-produce life in labs, skipping the sacred dance of lineage and time, shouldn't we wonder what's lost in the rush? Perhaps the most chilling parallel lies in motivation. The Wendigo isn't born from hunger, it's born from excess, from taking more than the balance allows. Today's biotech industry thrives on the same excess, patenting seeds, hoarding genetic data, resurrecting species not for ecological need but for spectacle. The Ojibwe speak of Gitchai Manitou's anger when humans hoarded the first corn, hiding it from the starving. The kernels turned to stone in their granaries. When corporations clone endangered species while bulldozing their habitats, or patent indigenous crops without sharing benefits, aren't we repeating that same deadly greed? These stories don't oppose innovation, they demand wisdom. The Hopi say monsters arise not from curiosity but from arrogance. Their Pahana prophecy warns of a time when flying heads, machines without hearts, would buzz across the land, stitching together life without ceremony. Yet they also tell of the Kachinas, spirit guides who teach humans to harness fire without burning the world. The difference lies in intent. When we clone to heal, like replicating insulin-producing goats for diabetics, we walk the Kachina's path. But when we engineer cats to flourish for profit, we edge closer to the flying heads. The old myths don't forbid progress, they beg us to ask, who pays the price when the line between healer and skinwalker blurs? The answer might lie not in test tubes, but in the stories etched into the land long before the first lab was built. The elders speak in hushed tones of the unfinished ones, creatures shaped by human hands but lacking the sacred breath of true life. Among the Cherokee, there's a story about a sorcerer who tried to sculpt a wolf from river clay, chanting false prayers to quicken its limbs. The beast did rise, but its howls were silent, its eyes empty. It stalked the village not with purpose but with a hollow rage until the people realized their mistake. They'd built a body but forgotten the spirit. The creature withered within moons, its clay cracking like parched earth, leaving behind only a warning: life cannot be forced into vessels it wasn't meant to fill. This isn't just myth. Modern cloning mirrors these ancient fears with eerie precision. Take the case of Snuppy, the first cloned dog born in 2005. Scientists celebrated his birth, but behind the headlines, Snuppy suffered from ailments unknown to his naturally bred kin: tumors, joint pain, a lifespan cut short. The Maasai tell a parallel tale of the Ngai Nkishi, a lion crafted by arrogant healers who skipped the rites of passage. It grew massive, yes, but its bones snapped under its own weight, its roar a strangled gasp. The elders nodded. Without the songs, the dances, the blessings, what you create is a shadow, not a soul. The Navajo speak of Chindi, the lingering energy of beings who died without proper ceremony, restless, corrosive. Cloned animals often carry their own kind of Chindi in their cells. Dolly the sheep's premature arthritis, the lung defects plaguing cloned calves, even the mysterious seizures in cloned macaques, these aren't just glitches. To traditional knowledge keepers, they're signs of dislocation, a life severed from the web of ancestry that sustains it. The Lakota describe it as Wanogi, a ghostly echo of what should have been. When a cloned horse wins races but drops dead at 5, half its natural lifespan, it's not just a failed experiment, it's a modern unfinished one, all body, no blueprint. Even the process of cloning echoes these warnings. The Hopi say corn must be planted with Pawamu prayers or the kernels grow hard as flint. Similarly, cloned embryos often fail to implant, their cells scrambling like unreadable scripture. Scientists call it imprinting errors, but Hopi elders would recognize it as Koyaanisqatsi, life out of balance. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia tell of the Mimi spirits who taught humans to hunt but warned against taking more than the dream time allowed. When cloned mice were engineered to overproduce growth hormones, their organs ballooned grotesquely, their bodies buckling under unnatural demands. The Mimi would whisper, "You've broken the pack." Perhaps the starkest lesson lies in the fate of the Gore, an endangered ox cloned in 2001. The calf died within days, its body rejecting the very life it was given. The Haida tell of a similar fate befalling the Galaka, a sea creature stitched together from stolen parts. It swam, yes, but in circles endlessly, as if searching for a soul it was never granted. The scientists who mourned the Gore's death might have understood more had they listened not to their microscopes, but to the elders who have known for millennia. Life isn't just code to be copied. It's a song, and without the right notes, the melody collapses. In the frozen expanse of the Arctic, the Inuit tell of a hunter who once ignored the old ways, spearing more seals than his village could eat. The waste-angered Sedna, the goddess of the sea, who dragged the animal's spirits into the depths. Overnight, the ice grew barren, the winds howled with no prey to answer, and the people starved, not just from hunger, but from a rupture in the pact between human and animal. This story isn't about punishment, it's about consequence. Every action in nature, the elders say, sends ripples through the web of life like a stone dropped into still water. Now imagine the stone is a strand of DNA and the water is time itself. Tribal cosmologies worldwide share this understanding that tampering with one thread can unravel the whole tapestry. The Choctaw speak of the Hashok Aqua Huiga, the grass dancers, spirit beings who maintain balance in the wetlands. When villagers drained a single pond for farmland, the dancers vanished and drought crept like a thief across the region. The elders knew, disrupt one knot in nature's net and the entire pattern shifts. Cloning poses the same risk on a scale we're only beginning to fathom. Resurrect a mammoth, and what happens to the tundra it no longer recognizes? Release a lab-grown ferret into the wild, and will it hunt with the wisdom of ancestors it never knew? The Haudenosaunee carry a prophecy about the two roads, one where humanity walks gently, leaving each stone and stream as they found it, and another where every step fractures the earth anew. Modern science often walks the second path, assuming we can control the aftershocks of our inventions. But indigenous stories remind us that life is a conversation, not a monologue. The Tlingit tell of Raven dropping a single pebble into the ocean to teach this lesson. The ripples grew into waves that swallowed islands, proving even small disruptions can swell beyond reckoning. When we edit genes or clone extinct species, we're not just altering biology, we're speaking into that conversation without listening for the reply. Even the process of cloning mirrors these cascading disruptions. To create Dolly the sheep, scientists harvested cells from a mammary gland, a violation of the Navajo Ada teachings, which forbid mixing body parts across sacred boundaries. The resulting clones often suffer from genomic imprinting defects, their cells confused by the artificial origins of their DNA. The Lakota would nod knowingly at these errors. Their stories describe Thethanka, the buffalo, who warned that life fragmented from its origins becomes a ghost of itself. A cloned salmon might swim, but without the ancestral memory of its spawning grounds, will it navigate currents or circle aimlessly like the Hades Galaka? The most haunting warnings come from the Hopi's Koyaanisqatsi prophecies, which describe a world where humanity's meddling twists nature into grotesque echoes of itself, trees that bloom but bear no fruit, rivers that flow but nourish nothing. Labs now stockpile DNA from endangered species like frozen libraries, but who safeguards the songs that once called those spirits into being? The Anishinaabe speak of Manaduwiwin, the life force that flows through all things, passed down like a torch through generations. Clone a wolf and its genes may be flawless, but who lights its Manadu? Without that flame, we risk creating a world of perfect shells and silent howls. Yet these stories aren't rejections of innovation, they're invitations to innovate differently. The Zuni tell of the Koko, divine dancers who taught humans to plant corn not by command but through patient observation. When the first hybrid crops failed, the people didn't abandon farming, they learned to listen to the soil's whispers. Modern cloning could heed that same lesson. Before reviving the passenger pigeon, shouldn't we ask why it vanished in the first place? The answer isn't in test tubes, but in the old tales of forests that fell silent when the circle of give and take was broken. The butterfly effect isn't just a scientific theory, it's woven into the oldest stories we have. When the Inuit hunter wasted those seals, the consequences weren't just starvation, the very language of the ice changed. The cracking of glaciers no longer signaled safe paths, the auroras dimmed as if mourning, and the people forgot the songs that once called the animals home. Cloning's ripple effects might be invisible at first, a cloned bison that disrupts prairie rhythms, a resurrected bird that outcompetes its modern cousins. But the elders whisper, the loudest tragedies begin as silences. The question isn't whether we can rebuild life from scraps of DNA, but whether we're prepared for the echoes of what we might unleash. The Iroquois tell of the three sisters corn, beans, and squash who thrive only when planted together. Their leaves whisper to one another, their roots share nourishment, their very existence a lesson in the sacred dance of diversity. Corn stands tall, giving beans a place to climb. Beans fix nitrogen in the soil, feeding the corn. Squash spreads its broad leaves, shielding the soil from drought. Separate them and the magic fades. This isn't just agriculture, it's cosmology, a reminder that life's strength lies in its intricate, irreplaceable connections. Now imagine a field where every stalk of corn is identical, where beans no longer twist toward the sun in their own unique way, where squash loses its riot of shapes and colors. The three sisters would weep. This is the hidden cost of cloning, not just the act itself, but the silent erosion of biodiversity it threatens. Native traditions have always revered variation as sacred. The Cherokee speak of Ulagu, the first deer, whose descendants were painted in 1,000 shades, some dark as forest shadows, others dappled like sunlight on water, because the Great Spirit knew the herd's survival depended on its differences. Cloning, by contrast, prizes uniformity, mass-producing genetic copies like factory widgets. Take the case of the Holstein cow, whose milk production has been optimized through selective breeding until 90% of the U.S. dairy herd now descends from just 5 ancestral bulls. The result, a single disease could wipe out millions of nearly identical animals, just as the Irish potato famine devastated monoculture crops in the 1800s. The elders' warning echoes: diversity isn't just beauty, it's survival. Even the process of cloning exposes this fragility. To resurrect the black-footed ferret, one of North America's most endangered mammals, scientists used cells frozen from a single female named Willa. Her genetic code now lives on in clones like Elizabeth Ann, but at what cost? The wild ferret population, already weakened by inbreeding, risks becoming a hall of mirrors, reflecting the same DNA endlessly. The Lakota tell of Tathanka, the buffalo, whose millions once darkened the plains. When hunters reduced them to a few hundred, the survivors carried hidden scars, genes bent by bottlenecked ancestry, vulnerabilities etched into their bones. Cloning might stitch back numbers, but can it restore the genetic tapestry that made buffalo resilient to blizzards, droughts, and diseases? The answer whispers in the wind. Life isn't a ledger of bodies, but a library of stories written in DNA. The danger goes deeper than genetics. The Maya teach that every seed holds a prayer, every harvest a covenant between human and earth. Their milpa farming system, a riot of corn, chilies, and medicinal herbs, thrives because each plant guards the others. When pests attack the corn, the chilies repel them. When disease strikes one variety, another resists. Cloning replaces this symphony with a soloist, endlessly repeated. Consider the Gros Michel banana, once the world's dominant variety, until a fungus called Panama disease wiped out entire plantations in the 1950s. Farmers replaced it with the Cavendish, another clone, another monoculture, and now history repeats as a new strain of the fungus spreads. The Maya would nod knowingly. Life, when stripped of its variations, becomes a house of cards. Worst of all, cloning risks reducing animals to mere concepts, biological patents rather than sovereign beings. The Nez Perce bred the Appaloosa horse for spots and stamina, but they also sang to each foal, recognizing its unique spirit. A cloned Appaloosa might carry the same coat patterns, but will it inherit the fire of those ancestors who outran wolves or leapt icy ravines? The Salish speak of Spolham, the life force that makes each salmon's journey upriver distinct, even as they swim the same currents. When hatcheries mass-produce fish from identical stock, those salmon often flounder, their instincts dulled by genetic sameness. The elders warn: homogenize life, and you don't just lose traits, you lose meaning. This isn't to reject cloning outright, but to question its scale and intent. The Navajo practice selective breeding too, but their sheep aren't copies. They're threads in a living tapestry, each with strength shaped by high desert winds and winter storms. Perhaps the path forward lies in blending old wisdom with new tools, using cloning sparingly to rescue critically endangered species like the northern white rhino, while fiercely protecting wild genetic diversity. The three sisters still murmur their lesson. Interdependence, not dominance, is nature's true blueprint. Ignore it, and we risk not just losing biodiversity, but forgetting why it ever mattered. To the Zuni people, the world isn't just interconnected, it's intentional, each life form placed by the divine with precise purpose. Their creation stories speak of Awanawalona, the breath of life, who carefully separated the first beings into distinct categories: clay for humans, feathers for birds, scales for fish. Crossing these lines wasn't just forbidden, it was unthinkable, a violation of cosmic order. Elders still recount the fate of a long-ago shaman who tried to blend corn and squash, hoping to create a perfect hybrid. The plants withered, the soil turned to dust, and the people starved until ceremonies restored the balance. The lesson: life's boundaries exist for a reason. To blur them isn't innovation, it's pollution, a sullying of the sacred blueprint. This belief finds visceral expression in the Zuni's Kiva ceremonies, where masked dancers embody animal spirits with meticulous accuracy. A single misplaced feather, a deer antler on a badger mask for instance, would halt the ritual, requiring days of purification. The reasoning is profound. To mix species, even symbolically, risks diluting the unique spiritual essence of each being. Modern cloning, with its transgenic experiments like glow-in-the-dark cats or goat spider silk hybrids, would strike the Zuni as more than scientific hubris. It's a form of desecration akin to pouring ink into a holy spring. The consequences aren't merely practical, they ripple across generations. The Navajo share this dread, speaking of chindi, restless energies left when life's natural cycles are disrupted. A cloned animal, they might argue, carries its own kind of chindi, a genetic ghost untethered from ancestral prayers. The generational impact of such spiritual pollution looms large in Indigenous warnings. The Hopi describe Koyaanisqatsi not just imbalance, but a tainting of life's fabric that lingers like a stain. Their prophecies tell of crops failing 7 generations after a single act of sacrilege, of children born with split spirits when the old taboos are ignored. This isn't superstition, it's systems thinking millennia ahead of its time. Consider the real-world case of genetically modified salmon, engineered to grow year-round. When these frankenfish escaped into wild populations, they didn't just compete for resources, they altered spawning cycles, distorted food chains, and introduced genetic weaknesses that could take decades to manifest. The Hopi would nod grimly. Pollution isn't always visible to the eye. Perhaps the starkest example lies in the Cherokee legend of Octina, the serpent stitched together from mismatched parts. Its very existence cursed the land. Streams ran backward, trees bore fruit that rotted before ripening. Modern labs might dismiss this as fantasy, yet cloned animals frequently suffer eerily parallel fates. Take the Gore, an endangered ox cloned in 2001. The calf died within days, its organs riddled with defects unseen in natural births. The Cherokee would call this udiig, the unraveling that follows when life's threads are forcibly knotted. Even successful clones like Dolly the sheep aged unnaturally fast, her cells fraying like overhandled rope. Science calls it telomere shortening. Traditional knowledge keepers call it what it is, the price of rushing into realms beyond our understanding. Critically, these traditions don't reject all intervention, just the reckless kind. The Zuni themselves selectively breed turkeys for ceremonial feathers, but only after rituals ask permission from the bird's spirit. The difference between this and cloning lies in consent, a dialogue with life rather than a dictate. The Ojibwe warn of Wendigo justice. Those who take without asking inevitably lose more than they gain. As biotech companies patent cloned livestock and boutique pets, profit isn't the only thing at stake. The very contract between human and animal, the trust that allows a Navajo shepherd to guide his flock, a Maasai warrior to drink blood from his cattle without slaughter, crumbles when life becomes a commodity to Xerox at will. The heart of these warnings isn't fear of progress, but reverence for consequence. When the Zuni elder Likiadeus was asked why hybrid crops were forbidden, he didn't cite theology. He held up two seeds, one ancient blue corn, one modern hybrid, and buried both in ash. The hybrid sprouted fast, then wilted. The blue corn took days longer, but its roots gripped the earth like fists. "The quick way steals strength from tomorrow," he said. "Cloning, for all its brilliance, may be the ultimate shortcut, a sprint into a future where the spiritual ledger remains unpaid." The elder's question lingers: when the land finally sends the bill, who among us will be left to answer? Long before labs conceived of cloning, the Cherokee people practiced a form of species preservation far more profound, a sacred pact with the land called gajugi, communal stewardship where every hunter, farmer, and child played a role in maintaining balance. Their calendar wasn't marked by fiscal quarters, but by ecological cues, the flowering of the unold wild onion signaling it was time to thin deer herds, the arrival of warrior wolves indicating the forest needed respite. This wasn't just management, it was dialogue, a reciprocal relationship where humans acted not as overlords but as careful listeners. When deer grew scarce, the Cherokee didn't manipulate genes, they imposed hunting moratoriums lasting generations, allowing populations to recover at nature's pace. Their oral histories tell of entire clans adopting animal totems, pledging to protect species like the red wolf not through technology but through restraint, a concept modern conservation often overlooks. The Pueblo peoples offer another masterclass in sustainability through their seed sovereignty traditions. For over 2,000 years, they've cultivated drought-resistant corn varieties like Hopi Blue, passing down kernels with the same reverence as sacred texts. Each harvest, families select seeds not just for yield, but for resilience, prioritizing stalks that weathered storms or resisted pests. The result, a living genetic library capable of surviving apocalyptic droughts, all without a single petri dish. Compare that to the vulnerabilities of cloned crops like the Cavendish banana, a genetic copy now teetering toward extinction as fungal diseases ravage monoculture plantations. The Pueblo's approach embodies what labs often forget. Diversity is life's best insurance policy. Their seed-saving rituals include singing ancient planting songs, believing the melodies carry memories of rains and winds that shaped each kernel's DNA. Science now confirms this isn't just poetry. Epigenetics shows plants do pass down stress responses to their offspring. The Pueblo were genome editors long before CRISPR, wielding patience and observation rather than scalpels. Meanwhile, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy's 7 generations principle reframes conservation as an intergenerational contract. Before altering landscapes, elders ask, how will this impact those born 7 lifetimes from now? This philosophy birthed the Three Sisters agricultural system. Corn, beans, and squash planted together in a symbiotic triad that has fed millions without depleting soil. Modern attempts to improve these crops through genetic modification often backfire. Monsanto's GMO corn, for instance, requires synthetic fertilizers that erode the very earth the Three Sisters nourish. The Haudenosaunee secret: they view plants not as commodities but as kin. When cloning reduces life to a patent number, it severs that kinship, a loss the Potawatomi scientist Robin Wall Kimmerer calls the grammar of animacy. Perhaps the most radical alternative comes from the Pacific Northwest salmon nations, like the Yurok and Karuk. For millennia, they've engineered entire watersheds to boost salmon runs, not with hatcheries, but with controlled burns that clear debris from spawning grounds and weir systems that let fish pass while ensuring sustainable harvest. Their methods have maintained populations for centuries. By contrast, modern hatcheries, cloning's clumsy cousins, produce fish so genetically weak they threaten wild stocks. The Yurok don't just sustain salmon, they negotiate with them, holding annual first salmon ceremonies where the season's first catch is ritually honored before its flesh is shared. This ritual reinforces a truth labs ignore. Conservation fails when it forgets reverence. These traditions share a common thread. They sustain life not by dominating nature's code, but by honoring its context. The Navajo's sheep selectivity preserves hardy genetics through harsh winters. The Inuit's rotational hunting lets seal populations rebound. Even the Amazon's Kayapo people cultivate forest islands that increase biodiversity. None require synthetic wombs or frozen DNA vaults, just deep observation and humility. As cloning's costs mount from twisted genomes to ecological ripple effects, these ancient blueprints offer a compass. Not toward a future where we resurrect lost species in labs, but one where we stop driving them to extinction in the first place. The answers were here all along, whispered in the rustle of corn leaves and the ripple of salmon runs waiting for us to listen. Dr. Henrietta Mann, a Cheyenne elder and scholar, speaks with quiet conviction when addressing cloning. Our stories say every being walks with the spirits of those who came before. When science builds a body without those ancestors' breath, what they create is a house with no one home. This sentiment echoes across conversations with modern native thinkers who view genetic replication not through a lens of prohibition, but of profound spiritual responsibility. Dr. Leroy Littlebear, a Blackfoot physicist, frames it as a question of entanglement. In our worldview, a mosquito's wing beat affects the buffalo's path. If you alter one thread in nature's web, the whole pattern shifts. Cloning isn't just changing DNA, it's rewriting relationships older than humanity. The hypothetical words of Hopi elder Marlon Kivama carry weight. When the Pahana, the lost white brother, returned with his inventions, our prophecies warned of square gray animals and flying heads. Today, those heads hum in laboratories, stitching life together without the songs that make it whole. His perspective reflects a widespread concern among indigenous scholars that their extinction projects prioritize spectacle over sacred reciprocity. Dr. Kim Tallbear, a Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate biologist, articulates this tension. Reviving a mammoth isn't just about genetics. Who will teach it to trumpet in a language it's heard forgot? The land it knew is dust. Without context, it's a museum piece wearing flesh. Vine Deloria Jr.'s iconic critique of Western science resonates here. You dissect the clock to find the clockmaker, but the pieces never tell you why time exists. Contemporary Lakota educators like Dr. Cheryl Crazy Bull extend this to cloning debates. Our creation stories say animals chose their forms through counsel and compromise. The wolf traded speed for wisdom, the turtle swapped swiftness for endurance. When humans overwrite those ancient negotiations, we erase their meaning. This isn't anti-science, it's a call for deeper dialogue. As Dr. Robin Wall Kimra Potawatomi suggests, what if labs partnered with tribes before resurrecting species? What if cloning protocols included the ceremonies that welcome spirits into new bodies? The Navajo concept of Haja harmony surfaces repeatedly. Educator Patty Talahongva Hopi envisions a middle path. Traditional breeders shape animals over generations, listening to the land's feedback. Cloning forces the timeline, but what if it paused to hear the Earth's whispers? Her words mirror Maori scholar Dr. Ocean Mercier's stance on gene editing. Indigenous knowledge operates like quantum physics. Every decision considers infinite relationships. Western science often misses the entanglement. Perhaps the most stirring perspective comes from a hypothetical Nez Perce elder, paraphrasing Chief Joseph's famous surrender speech. You clone to conquer extinction, but life cannot be owned. The genes you splice are borrowed from the thunder, the rivers, the ancestors. What happens when the bill comes due? These voices don't reject innovation, they challenge it to grow roots. As Dr. Daniel Wildcat Muskogee summarizes, true progress doesn't just ask if we can cheat death. It asks whether we've earned the right to try. Advocates for cloning often frame it as a moral imperative, a tool to undo humanity's ecological sins. De-extinction projects promise to revive the woolly mammoth to restore Arctic grasslands, while labs clone black-footed ferrets to repopulate vanishing prairies. On the surface, these efforts seem noble, even heroic, but indigenous traditions challenge this narrative with a piercing question: can good intentions justify violating life's sacred boundaries? The Cherokee tell of Actina's children, serpents born when a well-meaning shaman tried to duplicate the original monster's power to protect his people. The copies grew deformed, their scales oozing poison, turning the shaman's gift into a curse. The lesson: even the purest motives risk unraveling when we override nature's rhythms. Modern cloning mirrors this paradox. Take the case of the northern white rhino, reduced to 2 infertile females. Scientists rush to resurrect the species using frozen sperm and surrogate mothers, hailed as conservation saviors. Yet the Lakota whisper of Thatanka, the buffalo, who warned that forcing life where balance has been broken only deepens the wound. A cloned rhino may carry its ancestors' genes, but will it know the scent of native grasses, the language of territorial roars passed down through generations? The Maori speak of Wakapapa, the ancestral chain linking all beings. Sever that chain, they argue, and what remains is a hollow vessel, a biological monument, not a living thread in the web. Even the logic of ecological repair through cloning falters under indigenous scrutiny. Projects like Pleistocene Park aim to resurrect mammoths to slow permafrost melt, a seemingly virtuous goal. But the Inuit recount how Sedna, the sea goddess, punished hunters who disrupted migrations to help herds grow. The caribou scattered, the ice thinned, and famine followed. Their stories suggest ecosystems aren't machines where swapping parts restores function. They're living conversations, honed over millennia. Introduce a cloned mammoth without the Pleistocene's chorus of predators, plants, and microbes, and you risk becoming the shaman in the Haida legend who summoned a whale to a dried-up river. The creature gasped, stranded in a world it no longer recognized. The most damning rebuttal lies in cloning's unintended consequences. Proponents argue it's harmless to culture DNA in labs, yet the Hopi describe Koyaanisqatsi life unbalanced, where one disruption begets another. When Dolly the sheep was cloned, scientists didn't foresee her premature aging or the hundreds of failed embryos it took to create her. The Anishinaabe tell of Nanabajo, who tried to repopulate a forest by copying a single perfect tree. The clones grew, but their roots strangled each other, their identical weakness inviting blights. Today, cloned livestock shows similar fragility: enlarged organs, immune defects, shortened lifespans. The elders nod. Life resists being mass-produced. This isn't to dismiss cloning's potential outright, but to demand deeper accountability. The Nez Perce selectively bred the Appaloosa horse for endurance, but only after generations of observing which lines thrived in their valleys. Their patience honored a truth labs often ignore: resilience is earned, not engineered. If we clone the black-footed ferret to save it while bulldozing its habitat, haven't we missed the point? The Salish say salmon teach reciprocity. They gift their bodies only if we protect their rivers. Cloning offers a shortcut around that covenant, a way to have our fish and eat them too. Perhaps the sharpest counterargument comes from the Pueblo's Kiva ceremonies, where initiates learn that right action requires right relationship. A cloned condor might soar over the Grand Canyon again, but if its eggs must be hand-raised by humans because it's lost the art of parenting, what have we restored? The creature, or our own hubris, the old stories urge us to look beyond the can to the should, to weigh every innovation against the timeless question: does this honor the web or simply rearrange its broken strands? The answer won't be found in lab reports, but in the whispers of those who have walked the earth long enough to know some threads, once cut, can never truly be retied. From the Navajo's chindi warnings to the Cherokee's tales of the unfinished ones, Indigenous lore paints a chillingly consistent picture. Cloning doesn't just replicate life, it risks unraveling the sacred threads binding creation together. These stories speak of spiritual pollution when animal forms are copied without reverence, of hollow beings wandering without ancestral voices to guide them. The Hopi's Coyote prophecies foresaw creatures out of balance, while the Lakota's Wanagi described echoes of life devoid of soul. Even the process itself mirrors ancient taboos, forcing surrogates to bear unnatural young recalls. The Tlingit's stolen Galaka, and patenting genes echoes the Cherokee's stolen Anatsisqua feathers. At its core, these traditions warn that cloning disrespects the fundamental covenant between humans and animals, the reciprocal relationship where species coexist as sovereign beings, not raw material. The Zuni's Awanawalona stories condemn blending life's categories. The Salish's Spulham teachings mourn the loss of a salmon's unique journey, and the Diné's Haja principles expose the arrogance of rewriting natural rhythms. Whether it's Dolly the sheep aging unnaturally fast or cloned ferrets struggling to hunt, science keeps rediscovering what elders have said for millennia: life cannot be Xeroxed without consequence. Yet the most urgent warning lies in the ripple effects. Just as the Inuits' wasted seals brought famine, or the Iroquois' broken web prophecy predicted ecological collapse, cloning risks disrupting balances we barely understand. Resurrect a mammoth without its ice age microbiome, and does it heal the tundra? Or become a Koyaanisqatsi ghost trampling modern ecosystems? Release lab-bred condors without their parenting songs, and are we restoring nature, or filling it with silent imposters? The Nez say Wayakin, the life force, flows through generations like a flame passed hand to hand. What happens when we strike matches in the dark, creating light without warmth? As the debate rages between de-extinction advocates and bioconservatives, Indigenous wisdom offers a third path: humility. Not rejection of technology, but insistence that innovation walk hand in hand with reverence. Before we stitch another genome, perhaps we should ask the questions native cultures have honed over centuries. Who sings over the cloned calf to call its spirit? Who teaches the resurrected bird the migrations its ancestors forgot? The elders' warnings were never about halting progress. They were about remembering that life's value lies not in its blueprint, but in its boundless, irreplicable song. So as labs worldwide race to play creator, one question lingers like smoke from a ceremonial fire. When the last gene is spliced and the last test tube emptied, will we have rebuilt a world, or just a hollow imitation of one?